Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. Let me first inform you that Bharata First has launched its Knowledge Center for your benefit. We have an early bird offer for a limited period only. Please log in to kc.bharatafirst.com, kc.bharatafirst.com and register now. Don't miss this opportunity. Since you're here, I would also like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs a daily Big Picture quiz. Please do participate by going through the description in Big Picture videos. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and make a contribution. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. In case you have trouble with the UPI IDs, you may use the payment link in the description box below and follow the instructions. All this information, along with some must-see recommendations, are in the description of this video. Please go through it. And now on to the discussion. A highly anticipated first summit meeting between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin ended on Wednesday night and was described by both sides as a series of polite but adamantly stated disagreements about which country is the greater force of global disruption. After 4 hours of talks, the two leaders emerged separately and offered professional respect for each other like two skilled boxers describing the other's prowess. Both expressed a desire for a better relationship but announced no dramatic actions to arrest the downward spiral that has already hurtled them toward the worst U.S. Russia tensions since the Cold War. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the takeaways from the Putin-Biden meeting. Joining me on the program today are Vishnu Prakash, former ambassador, and Elisabeth Braw, resident fellow, American Enterprise Institute, Washington, D.C. Thank you to my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Elisabeth, let me start the program with you first. What were the key takeaways really for you as far as the summit is concerned? What stood out?
What stood out was the normality. So I think we all remember summits of past eras, meaning before Trump, when leaders met, including Soviet leaders and US leaders, and even though they had a lot of disagreements, and in fact their countries were trying to annihilate each other, they could still agree on confidence building measures to make sure that annihilation or aggression didn't happen. And that's what stood out this time, the normality, the willingness to build a rapport which can build a basis of trust between, if not the countries, at least the leaders, that can help avoid dangerous escalation, dangerous misunderstandings, dangerous mistakes.
Absolutely. Ambassador, let me bring you in now. There was so much talk about this summit. There was so much going on before the summit itself. Journalists and commentators were calling it the summit of, I don't know, the decade. I guess that's what it was. For lack of a better word, I'm going to say that. But do you think it met expectations at the end of the day?
Well, let me put it this way, that I've been married to international relations for 45 years. And yesterday evening, after listening to Biden and Putin, I renewed my vows for another 20. So that is my take on the summit. I think I should stop here, but since you don't want me to stop, it was diplomatic theater, and I'm very consciously saying that, or a diplomatic musical at its best. And, the way it was choreographed, one sensed that something was cooking when Blinken and Lavrov had a meeting in May. The buttons that were pressed were right ones, and thereafter things were said in public, but the way Putin pulled his punches, the way they made sure that the expectations were not raised, the stoic face that was presented for the public, for the cameras. I mean, one has seen a bit of this performance, and but I did expect that there'll be some movement, but I must confess that I never thought that they will go this far, and it speaks volumes of the leadership of and I'm not exaggerating. It was needed. The way things had descended into acrimony, the way of our friendly neighbor called China is being aggressive, its expansionist agenda, its desire to have a China-centric regional order, flouting norms, and Russia having become a kind of a junior partner to China was not conducive to world peace and stability. I think it has been a good development. How it will pan out is anybody's guess, but I have a reasonably good feeling that Russia is as much interested as the US to take things forward. Prank.
Absolutely. Elizabeth, coming back to you now, the fact that there were no expectations at all, because in summits of the past, U.S. presidents especially has spoken about resetting ties, taking a relook at ties, and building a new tomorrow, and we will go forward with vigor. This was the kind of language that was used in the past, and Putin has been in power for a while now, and this has been the fifth U.S. president that he is seeing. So the fact that there were no expectations at all, did you think that it made things easier?
It did, but if I can just add, there is power in having been around for a long time. Queen Elizabeth just this past week met Biden, which meant that she met the 13th sitting US president. She has seen it all, and likewise, Putin has seen a lot in the now 22 years that he has been in power. And he yes, Biden has been around for a long time, but he is new in this office, whereas Putin has negotiated with, as you said, a number of U.S. presidents already. But as you say, it is helpful to set the bar low, because otherwise journalists, analysts, and so forth start getting grandiose ideas about what can be achieved, and then everybody's disappointed afterwards. In this case, it would also have been foolish to raise expectations simply because there are such big differences between the countries, and for Biden, for his side to suggest that he was going to have breakthroughs with Putin would have then raised domestic opposition among people, say, well, you shouldn't be talking to Putin at all. So this was a wise move on both sides. And I think what's underrated in the public discourse is the value of the personal rapport between the leaders. And yes, they can represent completely opposed interests, but if they have that personal rapport, at least there is that link in case something should go terribly wrong between the countries. And then you won't have, as you this is the case with any sort of human interaction, human relationship. If you don't know a person, it's easier to think ill of them than if you do know the person. And I think that's the case on the highest levels of diplomacy as well. So it was just good for them to meet and have a chat. And yes, Biden may still think Putin is a killer, but at least now they will be able to pick up the phone and talk directly in case of should there be, God forbid, a terrible crisis, or even not a terrible crisis, just a routine matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just taking this particular point forward, Ambassador, there has been a lot of acrimony really between ties between Moscow and Washington, D.C. And Biden, too, has been speaking about how action should be taken against Russia. It's not like, they were sending out good messages to each other before the summit itself. The fact that the summit went on this way, and looking at what has happened in the recent past, would you say that it is at least a step in the right direction?
Frank, it is more than a step in the right direction. And in diplomacy, one does not go by stated positions. One kind of reads between the lines. Back channels are always at work. And what I sense is a meticulous preparation for the summit. It could not have happened without that. Two, the two leaders, as Elisabeth mentioned, are experienced leaders, understand realpolitik, and very interestingly, when pressed by the American media in an unscripted comment, that Biden made, he was in fact even a tad irritated. His response was quite significant, and I have excerpted it for you. He says Russia is in a very, very difficult spot right now. They are being squeezed by in China. Imagine the US president saying that. They want desperately to remain a major power. They want to be relevant, and it matters to almost every world leader how they are perceived. And then he goes on to say, that's what the United States is going through right now. How do we sustain us being the leading, the most powerful, and the most democratic country in the world? I such refreshing candor is rare to be seen, and I do believe that he did some straight talking, but he did it in a way that was not meant to offend, but to kind of send a message. He did say in his press conference that we have significant cyber capabilities and we will respond. I think there was a sense of chill in that message that, look, I mean, don't push us beyond a certain point. And it's a fact that Russia may not be a superpower, but it is a great power. It is a big military power. It is a country which is self-contained in the sense of its size, and it can work both ways. It has worked with the US in the past, even after 9/11, on JCPOA, and Putin himself raised the question of Afghanistan and offered to help. I'm not saying that everything is hunky dory, but leaders know when is the opportune time to go ahead and clinch a deal, or push the envelope, or not push the envelope, or pull back from the brink. And I think that, to answer your question, it is more than a step in the right direction. They're not just the right optics, but they are talking of things which are plausible.
Absolutely.
Arms control treaty, uh, cyber security talks, and cooperation in various fields. I think we are moving in the right direction. And Biden very well said that let's wait 3 to 6 months. Proof of the pudding is in the eating. So I don't think that anybody is being idealist. They are being quite practical, and they want to move forward, other things being equal.
Absolutely. Talking about being practical and pragmatic, Elizabeth, do you feel that there is a realization in Washington somewhere that, because of the sanctions, because of the West pushing Russia, that they are automatically going into China's hands, and they realize that China could be the next big threat, and hence the rapprochement with Russia?
Yes, absolutely. And in a sense, I think Biden needs Putin more than Putin needs Biden, because as you said, Frank, at the moment there is this fear in the US of Russia and China growing closer, and that is not a new fear. It was there during the Cold War, and beginning in the 1950s when China first became a major power, and it cooperated with the Soviet Union. And there was always this fear in Washington that the Soviet Union and China would team up, which is of course why Nixon ended up trying rapprochement with China. And that's exactly what we have. Or we have a similar situation today, which is that China poses an enormous challenge to the US, and I would argue a bigger challenge to the US and to the wider Western world than Russia does. And the US can't afford to focus at the same time enormous attention on both China and Russia as major adversaries. So of the two countries, China is a bigger threat. So that's why it's in America's interest to at least make sure that Russia is a little bit less active as an adversary. I'm not saying it could become a cooperation partner, but at least less or more passive, perhaps, is the word. And so Putin had very strong cards going into this conversation, and I think he continues to have strong cards.
Absolutely. So, where does this leave all the underlying issues, Ambassador? Are we going to see some kind of forward movement as far as the issues of cyber attacks, meddling in elections, the Crimean situation, and all these other big ticket issues that are still on the table? Can we see something happening on that front now that the heads have met?
I would think so because, I'm saying that not categorically, but with the hope and expectation. And the reason I'm saying that is that Russia, after the breakup of Soviet Union, has, to be honest, a bit of a complex. It craves respect. Putin wants to have peer recognition. And that has been patchy when it comes to the Western world. Also, the problem, as I see it, and Elisabeth's perspective will be very important, I get a sense that NATO still has a certain mindset which does not recognize the fact that China is a bigger threat, or if they do, they are hiding it very well. The NATO communique is quite interesting. 61 references to Russia, 8 and 10 to China. And it would almost appear that they are trying to keep the Russian bogey alive. Now, going to the extent of saying that they have blamed Russia for everything, that it's a threat to Euro-Atlantic security, complaining that there is a multi-domain build-up. They have even said something which I find rather peevish, to say that they are also cooperating militarily, China and Russia, including participation in Russian exercises in the Euro-Atlantic area. Last I heard, China and Russia are independent countries. I don't hold a brief for anybody, but they have a right to cooperate militarily. And there are statements to say, oh, we are working towards a partnership with Russia, but it does betray a certain hollowness. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that a decision has to be taken by NATO, whether they see China as a bigger threat or Russia. And they have to give the same elbow space to Russia that they give themselves. Because actually, they are trying to take NATO to the doorsteps of Russia and then saying, no, 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 we are not trying to be a threat to you. I don't think it cuts much ice. So that some hard decisions have to be taken. And I would agree that both countries need each other. We can debate till cows come home as to who needs who. But point really is that even during the height of the Cold War, Soviet Union and the US worked together. They pulled back from the brink. There is no reason why they cannot do it again, because it is, again, I would say, it's in the common interest of all countries. And Russia is a major player and would hopefully want to be on the right side of history.
Absolutely. Okay, time to get closing comments now from both my panelists with the best way forward and where do we go from here. Starting first with you, Elisabeth.
What's this summit, which was really just a conversation? I mean, that is the extent. As the ambassador pointed out, extremely well prepared, extremely meticulously prepared, but it was a conversation, and yet it has implications far beyond these hours that the two leaders spent together. So if we consider that, and if we consider how far apart the countries have been, there is enormous opportunity now for maybe not breakthroughs, but moderate steps, including on arms control, including on confidence building measures, including on cyber aggression. I know Biden proposed that some areas of critical national infrastructure should be off limit to both sides. I think that's an actionable proposal that's in the interest of both countries. So relatively small but concrete measures like that are all of a sudden are possible, and that's it's in the benefit of both countries, and they can still retain their major power status and with no loss of face, but with a much more predictable basis on which they operate. And so I think we're off to a really good start, albeit as both the ambassador said and you said, Frank, from a starting point where expectations were very low.
Absolutely. And Ambassador, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Yes, I would completely agree with Elisabeth that this has been quite a welcome development. I do think that both sides have a measure of each other. Experience counts. And fortunately, Biden has a A team which knows Russia well, is very experienced, and is willing to to stand, is willing to put in the amount of effort and bring it the vision to lower the temperatures and enhance stability. They are regularly talking about strategic stability. President Biden has gone to the extent of saying that there is a real prospects of building relationship with Russia. uh, there is, as they say, there is a proverbial slip between the cup and the lip, but one hopes that this time will be different because this is the need of the hour. And I have a good feeling that the leaders understand and will implement that vision.
All right, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much to both my guests for joining me on on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, what's coming out of this discussion is that the meeting is a very good step. This gives working groups to follow their leaders and try and sort out some major issues. At the moment, with China's rise, Biden needs Putin more than the other way around, even though the former will never accept it. There is a sense in Washington that the US can't take on both China and Russia, and since China is the bigger challenge, it is better to mend ties with Russia at the moment, who has been pushed closer to China as a result of the pressure from the West. Good progress has been made. We have to see what follows. The proof of the pudding is in its eating. Well, once again, let me remind you that Bharata First has launched its Knowledge Center for your benefit, and we have an early bird offer for a limited period only. Please log in to kc.bharatafirst.com and register now. kc.bharatafirst and register now. Don't miss this opportunity. Well, before I leave, let me thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs a daily Big Picture quiz. Please do participate by going through the description in Big Picture videos. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and make a contribution. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So do continue to show your love and support because I need it now more so than ever. In case you have some problems with UPI IDs, you can use the payment link in the description box below and follow the steps. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of this video. Please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.